Noisecast.
Noisecast and episode 25. It has been a while since the last Noisecast episode came out, which was maybe October last year with the Dresden and Tower transmissions episode, two-part episode. And after that, I've been doing some thinking, and starting from this year on, Noisecast will be having more English language content, because I believe that there is an audience and especially demand for English language episodes. There has been almost every time that there has been a Finnish language interview, there has been people asking for subtitling the episode or something like that, but it's a little bit too much work for me. So that made me think that why not just do more English language content. And this will be the first episode of a three-part interview with Mikko Aspa about his project Grunt. And we will be focusing on themes and visuals side of Grunt rather than the musical side, but there will be, of course, a little bit talk about that as well. But first things first, last weekend there was a good noise gig in Joensuu which I was attending. Joensuu is an interesting city near the Russian border, and I think the city has quite long roots in Finnish music history, rock music, and even industrial and noise music. There's a quite extensive lineup. There was Umpio, Keränen, Pakin, Pyhä Sähkö, Nikama, and Grunts was supposed to be playing, but Age of Decay was filling in on a last-minute cancel. There was quite good attendance at the gig. I would say maybe 50 people, including the artists, and the gig venue was this old wooden house that probably was some sort of a merchant house 100 years ago, was serving the venue for the gig. Age of Decay was the first act to play. I've seen Age of Decay several times, and I think this set was probably the rawest set that I've seen them do. Heavy scrap metal abuse, lots of feedback, and quite aggressive vocals. I asked the guys have they been rehearsing a lot, but naturally, because they were filled in at the last moment, the set was a little bit improvised. They had a lot of big metal objects and this long metal pipe, which was creating a little bit of sense of danger in the set. Scrap metal playing was so wild that contact mics kept up unplugging, but you can see that the band has long history, because the set would not stop there. They would just quickly unplug it and keep going, not getting confused by a little bit of interesting action. Nevertheless, it was a good set. I enjoyed it highly. Pyhä Sähkö, which translates to, I guess, just holy electricity or something like that. It is a new project from the guy who does Järmäi. And I think in Järmäi you can hear quite a lot of Aural Hypnox band's influence, but of still having like his own sound. I would say with Pyhä Sähkö I heard, at least in my ears, a lot of like Treparerin's Ritualen influence. There was this really heavy synth wall at the beginning with MS-20 it was modified all the time, and it kept pulsing and creating these waves of really good, this kind of gritty but buried heavy synth wall. And then there was scrap metal, which was used not in a bashing way, but more like creating these howls and kind of screaming sounds from this tinny metal, which I have also done at other projects. There was also vocals, but they were really buried. There was some sort of a special microphone which kind of needed a lot of gain to push through, and he did use it a little bit of more gain in the beginning, but it kept like feedbacking, so he turned it down a little bit, so it was kind of a texture among the heavy synth wall. And there was a great background video of I guess it was some sort of a oil refinery or something like that, where there was this huge chimney and like a flame burning when they burn the excess whatever toxins, and it was shot through like a almost like a telescope or something like that. There was just this round image, grainy, filming the burning flame, which kind of served, I guess, as a metaphor for the set. Highly enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to see where this project is going. Especially looking forward for a first tape, because it was very like nice and thick material. Nikama was playing next. I've been trying to see Nikama for like over a year, but there's always been something that I haven't been able to witness her project live. And now that I had the chance, I was very excited. I have read some gig reports like a week before this gig, and there was like a little bit of mixed feelings about how the gig was. Not enough of that, and maybe too much of that, and a little bit of like a clueless action. But this gig in Joensuu was like superb. There was really good control and super crunchy sound, and I like the approach of two contact microphones, where the other one was like creating this background texture, and the other one was like doing these really screechy and punchy sounds. It was really good harsh noise set. And in the beginning, I mean in the end of the set, there was also these trademark vocals that she does, really like bone chilling screams. It was really good. I have no idea how long the set was, but it was, to my taste, perfect length. And I think Nikama has now found the thing that makes good live gigs, and the only thing that we are waiting for is a debut tape, which is hopefully in the works at some point soon. Pyhä Pakin was playing next, a little bit of a different project in between these harsh noise blasts. The project has already 5 tapes, so it's I think it hasn't been talked about that much, because this sort of dark ambient, I guess, isn't really the flavor of the month, so to speak. But it was a really good set. There was like a bass guitar with extra strings, and it was played with whatever is the thing that you play violin with a bow or something like that. And he kept layering the sounds, so it was like never boring. There was always something happening, like this really tasteful cinematic soundscape. I was so impressed of the gig that I immediately had to go to his merch table and like say, I'm gonna take all of the tapes that you have available. And I think the tapes are sort of unlimited, because at least on his Bandcamp site it says that they are done by demand. Like if you order, he will make some more. Definitely worth to check out. There was this really heavy kind of cold meat influence, which I also mentioned to the artists, and he agreed with it, that cold meat has been a very strong influence with the project. It's quite rare to see this type of cinematic dark ambient nowadays, and I'm glad that someone is doing it such a high level. Very good set. And then there was only two left. Two harsh noise kings. Keränen played first. I think nowadays, when you think about harsh noise that you see live, it's mostly driven with like contact mics and these really like scrap metalish punchy sounds and relentless feedback and such. But I think Keränen has this kind of unique old school style. The playing is the way he represents himself, like dressed neatly and sitting down and stuff like that. But there's this really like once he gets his set going, it's like this full on battle with his set, creating new sounds, and there's pretty much always something malfunctioning, so that is like eliminated from the chain. And this time it was also violently thrown on the floor, and this small speaker that was, I guess, kind of purpose was to do feedback was just shattered there. High electricity type of sounds. There was moments when the set a little bit, at least in my ears, kind of went off the rails and the sound kind of jammed down to this, but then it just, like a master he is, he just kept manipulating it enough that that sweet crunch just came, and very loud. Like maybe 2 minutes into the set, you could always like instantly smell burning speakers, which kind of put the gig arrangers in a sort of a alert mode, and I could see one of them running to the main mixer and putting the volume down a little bit, and that kind of made the burning smell go away. Highly enjoyable set. It's always nice to see a master at work. It was hectic and very like super loud. Umpio had the honor to close out the night, and I've seen so many Umpio gigs in the last 10 years. There was a moment when each time you saw Umpio, the gigs were just getting better and better and better all the time. And it seemed like there's not gonna be like an apex point. It's just gonna get better all the time. This time Umpio had a little bit of a twist for the gig in the beginning. We went to supermarket earlier with him, and he bought a candy bag of these Finnish UFO candies. And before he started to play, he like put the bag and everyone had to take one and pop it in when he says so. So everyone took the candy, and then like the set started. The gear itself consisted of contact mic materials that have mostly been like dumpster dived kitchen appliances and stuff like that. Very classic Umpio gear. There was also some tape action and that little chaos pad that he uses. There was this play of like acoustic sounds, and then some points there were these really hard blasts where he would like punch the metal object to the table, and then like at the same time hit the volume almost to the max level from the channel. It would create this really like thunderous sound. And there was playing with that and acoustic sounds for quite some time, and also these trademark insect electronic type of sounds. And then towards the end, the set kind of accumulated into more and more harsh sounds. There wasn't that much of that relentless harsh noise bashing that there is usually at the end. This time it was more like playing with the dynamics of the set, and maybe the super blasts were a little bit not there this time, but there were those really hard punches of scrap metal sound and like that kitchen appliance sound. And of course the gig was ended with the classic channels down, throw something metal object on the floor and it just clang clang clang, and that's it. was really, really good set. I enjoyed it a lot. As the whole evening was a great success once again. I visited there last year and it was pretty much the same amount of audience, maybe a little bit more actually this time. So it's nice to see that the event is kind of getting more popular. And when you go there, you don't really see those like how would you say common suspects. There is really a lot of like new audience, which is always nice to see that you don't have to go to a gig where you know like 80% of the people that are there. So it's nice to see that people are getting more exposed to noise. And of course, the brothers who are arranging these gigs, they are also involved in many music activities in Joensuu. So that might also help to draw new audience to noise gigs. But as mentioned, here is the first part of the three-part Grunt interview. I hope you enjoy it. This cast had a Mikko Aspa or slash Grunt interview maybe over a year ago or so. And there was a quite high demand of subtitling the episode or something like that, but it would be a lot of work to do that, so I think the better option would be to just do an interview in English. And this time the focus would be a little bit more on the thematic side of Grunt, not so much on the sound-wise approach. But I guess first thing I would like to ask is what Grunt is nowadays. How would you describe it now that it has been running for over 30 years?
I think it's about the same as it has been since beginning, and it's actually maybe closer to early days than something that was in like late 90s or even early 2000s. So the basic idea could be summed into industrial noise in a sense that it's sort of part of the 90s noise culture, but there is the element of industrial culture in a way that I see it. And there's elements of power electronics or something else, but more than any kind of precise sub-genre of this type of music. It's more like industrial noise covers a lot of different expressions, and also kind of the state of mind in releasing or publishing the material.
I think Grunt has been shifting a little bit more towards, well, a little bit more experimental fields, maybe a little bit sound-wise, maybe in the past few releases, like Karike or something like that. At least in my ears, it was a very different kind of release, and I think a lot of people share that opinion as well. In the early stages of Grunt, as mentioned on the website, that there wasn't really a specific aim with the thematics or so on. It was more about like maybe a little bit like from the punk culture or something like that. Would you agree on this statement?
Yeah. In a way, yes, but the thing is that I wasn't necessarily from punk only. I was before I was listening punk, I was listening also all sorts of metal, but even before that I was sort of captured by underground culture in general, meaning comic books or science fiction underground, or in Finland at the time late 80s, early 90s, things like unusual films, mainly like splatter movies or horror movies and anything related, they were all were basically almost one underground. So if you were exposed to one of these things, very quickly you would learn about the other things. And the type of culture of early 90s was that there was a lot of interest in all things kind of transgressive or violent or forbidden in general. The laws at the time were not very favorable for like horror movies or almost anything obscure. And it's something that influenced me as a maker of sound also, that it included elements of punk or metal, but also the other types of expression. And also being fairly young at the time, there wasn't any very coherent ideology behind it. It's more like writing about topics what would be fairly natural for 15-year-olds. So there would be anything nauseous things happening in society that would be sort of almost like an automation for people with sort of angst and level of like a disappointment in how mainstream society looks like. And in every expression, I also felt that I was sort of an outsider. So I can't say I was ever like a traditional punk, nor I was like a traditional metalhead. So in a noise underground, which I discovered, it's in a way it was the entire expression is made out of outsiders of some sort. So there's no sort of uniform culture or something like that. And I think what I was doing at the time also resonated with the 90s noise in a way that it was sort of lawless or no rules or no guidelines type of noise. So it was slightly different from how noise tends to be now. And there wasn't any sort of there wasn't like noise ideology like there would be a punk ideology.
No dogmatics.
So the content wasn't anything particular. Each release might be something different, and also the sound of the releases would be sort of experimental in a way that they would just give it a try to new approach or some new style without thinking how the project should be sounding. So the early stages were very like relaxed and free experimenting.
Where would you think that this period kind of ended and maybe a little bit more clear focus would enter the picture? Maybe late 90s or something like that?
The first album that came out on CD isn't anything different. Because there is, even in the early days, there's a difference in a way that sound-wise, there's a quite drastic difference in 93, 94 compared to 95 and 96. So there was also this shift of, if the two early years could be said to be sort of a industrial atmosphere in a way that it contains sort of a social criticism or if not criticism, at least some sort of a bitter remarks about what is going on. But in somewhere in those years I was so captured by Japanese noise, that the kind of absurdity and sort of a Dadaistic approach of many Japanese bands suddenly appealed to me greatly in a way that I thought also with my own work that bands like Gero Gege Gege or Hanatarashi or Violent Onsen Geisha or Masonna or bands like these they would reject also this sort of a commentary, and it felt almost like more radical to be absurd, which is in tradition of avant-garde is obviously sort of also one way of like a radical art to manifest itself. But there was a few years when the emphasis of sound and vocals and artwork would be dominated by things that were just weird or bizarre for sake of being, but it also rejected sort of I wouldn't necessarily use pornography or violence or something, but it would be in favor of something sort of very unexpected graphics, which would be nothing very spectacular, but just just something what even at the time felt like you could just use anything and it would be still suitable for noise. And Perfect World, which is the first album, it was still operating in the very same way as the tapes of the time. So it was just making songs almost on daily basis, recording every week. Then when some stuff has been accumulating, I would just check out what would fit into length of next release. And Perfect World wouldn't have anything. There wasn't really like idea behind the album. It was just collection of tracks made at the time.
I think the song titles even are like dates or something like that. There isn't like a clear...
Yeah, and that was happening already in some other tapes as well, that it was just indicating the recording date of the song. And it was after that first album when change happened, and it might have, I didn't like very carefully think about at the time when it was happening, but it really happens in the same time when I moved from Imatra to Lahti.
Yeah, I was actually coming to this, that there must be like a shift in your surroundings and even like more time to be a nihilistic young man.
Yeah, so this was moving into your own apartment, having plenty of time to be sort of isolated with your own ideas, and that as a young man it obviously shifts your state of mind into all sort of other types of ideas. And it was like 97, 98 when I was there was a both shift of living alone, but also getting more sort of coherent idea what I should be doing with the project. And in the 90s I was still sort of, you can see with name Grunt, I was still like toying around with different spelling types of the name and not sure where exactly to take the project musically. But then in last years of 1990s I was quite confident what it should be and what it's about, and it also meant that it returned into covering the ideas what I was very interested in the first place. Like even if I'm obviously still very much into anything weird and Dadaistic and bizarre and absurd, there's still like a sort of natural way for me to deal with things what I'm interested in. And there are a number of things that sort of my interest revolve around, and sort of a decision that I will deal with that despite it would be so-called cliché or it would be used in a type of music before, but it was something that was my interest already before I was into noise. So just doing, shifting the project into doing what I'm naturally drawn into. So it was about the times when there was like a split LP with Macronunify and Facial Mess and maybe Someone's Watching tape, what was later reissued as an like an album. But it all that leads into Terror and Degeneration, which wasn't originally going to be an album, but it was a couple of the 7-inches and compilation tracks and all that, and releases got cancelled and delayed, and eventually a lot of different small releases were collected in Terror and Degeneration, and that might be the first sort of almost as a coherent album, because it has a certain uniform quality what is very similar to what was happening later on, but it still wasn't album what was made like originally made to be album. It was originally made to be a couple of the 7-inches and compilation tracks. And
I think at the same time Europe After the Storm also came out, which is, I think, I'm not sure, it's late 90s, and that's like it's a very strong title and it suggests many things. Yeah. And I would kind of think that would also be a little bit very fitting to this shift.
Yeah, it is, and that's also released what was originally just a half an hour tape release, 50 copies on American label, and when I got the offer to release it as a CD, if there would be a bonus material, it was made as a CD with some other tracks thrown to make it full length, like live tracks, and so it's, in a way, it is album worthy material, but it's again one of these early works that were not meant to be albums in the first place.
Right. Speaking of that release, what is the storm that Europe is existing after?
At that release, the wars in the Balkan was still sort of aftershocks of Balkan was happening, and it was something that there had been quite strong feeling that there won't be wars in Europe anymore after Second World War. And then the Balkan wars were quite brutal in a way and quite messy and complicated, involving these different sides, and it was sort of a shock for a lot of people to realize that the war in Europe is still reality. And when the war ended, and it was also fairly, I could say, unfinished business type of situation where the war ended. It was an interesting topic at the time when it wasn't really, there was obviously internet existed, but we were not bombarded by war in the same way as like in social media era. So now making a release about currently active war would be, at least to me, it would be very uninteresting. But at the time, it was still something that felt strange in a way that people would, how to say, like, why wouldn't there be European war? It's almost like when Europe After a Storm, the lyrics in a release should be printed, and it's sort of concludes that it's only preparing for the next storm. And it felt very accurate back then, and I think in these times it wouldn't be any news to say that war in Europe isn't anything that would have been like out of question.
Yeah, I think war in Europe nowadays exists on so many different levels, and I was quite much younger back when the Balkan War was, but even I remember like grainy news footage of like mass grave sites and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it was quite intense things to watch on evening news or something like that, and that would be like happening on Europe's soil. So
yeah,
that even
and
made
like ethnic cleansings and NATO bombings on, I'd say, sort of questionable targets, and there was a lot of different qualities and nuance in that conflict, and a lot of these wars also have they raised interesting questions about different nations and ethnic populations, and how the Europe in general is changing its shape. And yeah, so the release was mainly dealing on all topics surrounding that conflict, but not necessarily bound in time. So there was like timeless observations, and I think Europe After Storm, it's still a sort of a valid now. It doesn't necessarily address any like a single incident.
It definitely has stood the test of time. I also read from the website that in the mid-90s you were saying that kind of violence and porn and stuff like that is kind of too much used material, that you wouldn't be that much interested in using that, but they kind of entered the picture quite heavily later on.
Yeah. But in the say, like I was explaining about say like art in general, or the mood of the Finnish underground, and when I started as like drawing comics, for example, I was drawing what teenagers would be very drawn to be doing. So there was like a lot of sort of Chainsaw Massacre type of plots, gore and blood type of things, and one of my friends was just commenting, why you always do something like violent and perverse, and why not do something else for a change. And I am interested also in some other things. So at the time also the comics where there was like new wave of alternative Finnish comics happening, which was very interesting thing, and then my style was shifting more into that type of expression. And in Noise it might be slightly similar, that things I was sort of drawn to automatically, I just sort of consciously was trying to do something else than would automatically come. But later on I just sort of had a realization that I'm not really doing it for the audience or other people's expectations. So I can just do whatever is what sort of naturally I would be drawn into, and like eroticism or violence, it's timeless in a way that there's nothing. I mean, cliche means that something lost its power or lost its original intention, and I think those topics, they are sort of eternal, and it's only a matter of how you approach them. And for me, the approach is also in a way sort of hands-on approach. It's not kind of making art for other people, but it's more like my own way of doing things. So basically, I have just one person to appeal in what I do.
During the late 90s, Grunt also played some gigs. Were there like any specific gig that you would have like a full thematic for the gig with the background video and such?
It was the second show. So the first show was in 95, and it was still the time when, first of all, I didn't have any equipment or idea how to make live noise, and there was no other artist to give any advice how it could be done. And so there was mostly using like a normal drum kit and guitar feedback and that kind of things, and the sound was closer to noisecore than real noise. And then it took more than 3 years to really know how to make the live show. But when I played in 98, it was already terror and degeneration material I was performing, so it was basically the second show is already Grunt as most people know. So there was backing videos and power electronics approach in a set. So after that I changed the way of playing depending on what and where I was doing, but some of these early shows reminded very much what I was doing on full-length albums.
Would you happen to remember what the first video was like, the background video?
At the time, I had access for video editing in studio, and being a sort of avid collector of or involved in the VHS trading network, there was a bunch of videos. I made a collage or sort of crossfading, what was like an amazing thing of video editing at the time. So you could crossfade images and change the chord tones and all that. So it was a sort of video collage of political extremism and pornography. So the usual drill, so to say.
Yeah, but even back then, making a background video was like really hands-on work, and not like today that you just collect clips online or stuff like that, or video your own stuff.
Yeah. So it I didn't film anything myself for some of the first ones, but it was still like live VHS video mixer editing. Okay. There was like a video mixer in video, this kind of studio that you could use and make one master tape out of the mix, and that would be displayed on the shows.
Right, so you could like run several VHS tapes and mix those into a master tape or something like that.
Yes, so there was like two decks and the mixer, so it was more like a video DJ type of thing. So there's very limited amount of effects or like editing possibilities in general. So you basically make a crossfade, slight tone changes, a little bit of speed adjustments, but not much else. Maybe some still images would be possible. Make pause on other VHS and get still image on video. But yeah, it's some of the videos were sort of classics that I have very strong feeling about I think even the second Grunt show I displayed Whip and Pierce video, which made later as a kind of a spin-off to Clinic of Torture.
And after the late 90s albums, there was maybe the next big work after that was Seer of Decay, I think. There were, of course, releases like every year in that between those periods. But I think Seer of Decay was the second, like, how would you say, a landmark?
Yeah, it was really the first album that was made to be like real album. Anything before that has been either a tape release with something added on CD version, or the original release has been a collection of sort of just not really whatever, but still like a collection of something that was done. But with a Seer of Decay, it was like 2005 or something when I started to record it. It was released 2006. And there was just this moment when I was checking out my past discography, thinking that what a mess is. There's so many small releases, so many like different versions of having a tape, then CDR, or a lot of splits, or some kind of collaboration, all kinds of different labels around the world, and there's like no coherent approach and no sort of album really. And Seer of Decay was first time when I was thinking that I should be doing like actual full-length release. And then 2006, when it came out, it was a double CD where the first disc is like a power electronics or industrial noise kind of thing. The other disc was like acoustic metal junk noise. And I had bought digital recorder around that time, and at the time it was something sort of new, that you could actually capture metal in this kind of a very sharp, like no tape hiss, no blown out tape saturation, and all these things that are great. But then when you first time had an opportunity to really record like a sharp hi-fi sound, that felt so different that it made me think that making this kind of recording that sounds almost like a real studio recording out of no effects metal junk. And at the time there wasn't much of that happening in Finland. Now if somebody would say I'll do a metal junk album, it's not anything so unique anymore, but at the time it felt like this is something that should be done because it wasn't really happening.
I was listening previously old Noisecast episode with Russell Haswell, and he was talking about like digital files and stuff like that. When you record with that digital things, that the even the silence parts are much more deeper because there's no like hiss happening. It's just absolute silence.
I am not a fan of computer noise, but I listened to the same episode and I sort of agree in a way that before there was noise that happened completely without even microphones. It was just like file processing. The silence was never actual silence. There was always something there caused by a magnetic tape or, usually magnetic tape would be still causing something, and now when there was a digital silence, there was like absolutely nothing there. And the dynamic difference of having absolutely nothing and then having maximum digital noise blast happening in this kind of a fragmented, broken file manner, it is a sort of damaging in a ways that I usually don't like, but in a sort of philosophical level, I appreciate his approach.
Speaking of Seer of Decay, what was the kind of running theme with this album? Because there's like you said, 2 separate discs, which also very drastically differ on approach. So how do you tie those together?
The Seer of Decay, I think it's the name itself. When you think about what it means, it's in the theme was already present in earlier releases. I would think like collaboration split CD with Kloama, or more the collaboration, the later one, had sort of similar ideas covered, and there was a lot of how to say, it's not like a personal diary by any means, but I could see myself as a Seer of Decay, which is many years of already spent in collecting and being involved with a lot of this kind of things, that I was sort of immersed into all things what could be called of some kind of decay in a like a social sense at least. And there are other like themes surrounding the album, and the acoustic side is more, it deals with discoveries of abandoned cities of Chernobyl area, and it's at the time it was also sort of a thing that interested me, and it was also roughly 20 years ago when it wasn't so common to find the footage or even information about it, and it was something that finally people were making returns to Pripyat and seeing like what's up in this nuclear, after the nuclear disaster, and it felt fitting for the audio, and it was something I was interested at the time. And the albums don't necessarily have any like something like intrinsic connection to each other, but it's like two different sides, which is some also a kind of let's say, it's not a plague or but it's still something that when you are making an album, you would hope, okay, this will be sort of not really final statement, but it would be sort of like a grand statement of what project is about, and then showing just one side of what Grunt is doing didn't feel like it's enough, so there's like a couple of different sides. So also thematically it's not meant to be like just one thing, but it shows a couple of different things.
It's interesting that the second CD would have some echoes of Chernobyl and stuff like that, because you were also a young boy when it happened, and it affected quite a lot of the Imatra area and the eastern border of Finland, so maybe even echoes of that.
Yeah, well, at the time when it happened, it was, I lived in just like 4 kilometers from the border, so you would have to take certain measures. You couldn't eat the apples from the trees, or you were not really encouraged to hang out in a forest or where all the nuclear fall down would be likely to be touched, most people were encouraged to sort of avoid it for a certain amount of time. It wasn't anything like panic at the time, but there was some concern how it will affect population because it was happening so near.
Yeah, I think back then they were kind of like hushing that it's nothing, everything's gonna be okay, and like now, decades later, they are actually doing like research then that it actually affected quite a lot of things in reality.
Yeah.
You mentioned these split albums with Kloama, and especially the first one that deals with the the title is, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Belaismerts, or how even to say it.
Valkoinen kuolema in Russian, so it means white death in English.
I think this was the first time that with the Grunt project you were dealing with the war past of Finland. Next one would be like Petturian rooli, but was there something even before that?
Nothing in such a depth because the war obviously was as a sort of a overall, not really theme, but something that was mentioned somewhere. But the White Death release, meaning Valkoinen kuolema, the split, it wasn't necessary about the war, it was about war propaganda. And we chose to cover both the propaganda what Russians were directing to Finnish soldiers, as well as the propaganda what Finns were spreading to Russians, and also the sort of domestic war propaganda. And propaganda has been some like a topic that interests me still greatly, in a way, like the use of language or iconography that affects like human emotion or how you see the world. And I think that it was my suggestion to make it, but Josef Kloama had a bunch of samples that he was already, I think he had already for his tracks, and it was like old wartime speeches and stuff like that, which wasn't, even then, it wasn't something you could just go and load from the internet, because it wasn't.
You have to find them, actually.
It wasn't yet used for streaming in those days. So you had to really do some legwork to get radio transmissions or like finding a documentary, having a VHS copy of it, and then sourcing the audio.
Where would you find these?
I think it mostly would be either library or just documents coming from TV. So there's also lots of accidental elements that at the time a lot of people would be just recording interesting documentaries that came from TV, or on a video trading network, more obscure and classic documentaries would be traded international even. So you would see all these there's like sort of industrial classics, all the sort of Killing for America or whatever. These what people have been sampling to death, so to say. But there were some of these documentaries where the kind of the atmosphere of the spoken word is so unique that it's I don't even mind if I hear yet again certain passages, because they have this airy quality. But in a Finnish war related things, I don't think we really have a shortage over here. It's like belongs to national, like a story about Finland.
Absolutely.
So if you would be just checking out what is coming from TV on a weekly basis, you would find out about interesting documentaries on topic, at least at the time. I haven't watched TV for decades now, so I don't know what is coming there now, but at the time you could still see interesting documentaries.
Earlier was mentioned that violence and porn would be like typical tropes of industrial music or power electronics, but I would also add propaganda there. It's like a timeless and classic theme, like a third one of the bunch. Like a third one of the bunch.
Noisecast.